Alright guys, welcome back to Urge. We're moving on in the subclass series today into Xanather's Guide to Everything for the Clerics. First up, we have the Forge Domain.
Yes.
So if you're new to the channel, or to the subclass series in general, we're going to look at the RP value, the combat value, and the overall class synergy. After we look at each of the individual abilities, we're going to rate those three categories based on how these abilities gained in the subclass improve on the base class.
Yep.
So without any further ado, guys, we're going to jump straight into it.
Right. As with pretty much any full caster or even half caster based subclasses, you do get some free spells as part of the subclass, and they usually do a pretty good job of theming these based on what the class has worked around. No exception here with the Forge Domain Cleric. Stuff like magical weapon, elemental weapon, wall of fire, protection from energy, even with some of the proficiencies you get that adds in creation and fabricate. So there's some really cool, interesting spells that normally clerics wouldn't get, or at least wouldn't have free. They would have to prepare those, and normally probably wouldn't be in your toolkit most of the time.
Yeah.
So an interesting set of spells, I think, that are very interesting and helpful at the same time.
Yes. It's kind of a mix of combat and RP there.
Right.
Sort of like identifying everything in creation, though.
Yes.
So, at level 1, and you get bonus proficiencies. You gain proficiency with heavy armor and smith's tools. Also, at level 1, you gain Blessing of the Forge. Essentially, every morning after a long rest, technically after a long rest, you can imbue an item, non-magical object, suit of armor, or a simple or martial weapon, and give it +1. So if it's suit of armor, you're going to gain +1 to your armor class. If it's a weapon, you're going to give it +1 to its attack to hit and attack damage as well. Once you finish a long rest, you can use this feature again. So basically every day you have to kind of redo it. It's just part of your morning ritual. You wake up, you touch your thing, you get your bonus.
But you also just switch it every day too. If you maybe you come across some magical armor and you really don't need that AC, so you can switch it over to your weapon because it has to be a non-magical weapon to start with. So it allows you some options. If you come across one or the other early on in your campaign, you can switch it for what you need to do.
Yeah. And you can only do it once a day, so you can't like touch everyone in your party.
Right, it's like everyone to get a buff. No, that's not how it works. The one thing it's reading the subclass we were looking at earlier is both the Blessing of the Forge and this next ability were super wordy. I don't think for any reason, but they are. And I'm going to do my best to shortcut this the next ability. At level 2, it's your subclass specific channel divinity, which is Artisan's Blessing. Essentially, what it allows you to do is reforge, remake something out of metal, but you've got to have metal or some similar material. Like you could technically, the way it's worded, make a sword, like a great sword, out of gold. Like if you have like gold coins, you would sacrifice the cost of the equal value. Repurpose is a good word. If it's 20 gold coins for this item, you could then basically put 20 gold coins on the table and use your skill over the course of an hour to manufacture a short sword out of it.
Right.
So it takes a whole hour. So you can't just like in combat something great like you fight in a rust monster. This is a great example I just thought of.
Yeah.
Good on me.
Got him.
A rust monster attacks you and he destroys your shield. Well, you can't be like, okay, and I'm going to use my action to make shield. No, it takes a full hour. So this is going to have to happen out of combat. But you could, in a pinch, we talked about earlier, maybe you've come across somebody you've freed, like he's been taken captive, you want to help him stay alive, and you're camping out for the night or taking a little short rest, and you would maybe can make him a shield just so he can hold a shield to help keep himself alive, or give him like maybe a dagger to fight with, so he's got something to help keep himself alive.
Then also at level 6, we're going to gain Soul of the Forge. So essentially, you're just going to gain resistance to fire damage, which is pretty good, being one of the most common damage types in all of D&D 5e. And also, while wearing heavy armor, you gain +1 bonus to your armor class. So just another survivability bonus here, adding more to your armor class here. With another +1. So by level 6, you're already getting +2 to your armor class, assuming you're giving your own armor the +1 from your Blessing of the Forge. And Soul of the Forge, you're giving you that also bonus to your +1 AC.
Very fat.
Yeah,
very defensive.
Very high armor class, very early, for sure.
You do get some offensive help as well at level 8. You get Divine Strike, which is available in several cleric subclasses here. It is extra D8 fire damage on your melee attacks at level 8. Level 14, that extends to 2D8. And of course, being heavy armor, you can be up in the fray of things and kind of expect to be there and not be as huge a risk, especially with the other AC buffs you get. So giving yourself a little extra fire damage if you can't get a spell off because you're in close quarters makes you not to sacrifice as much. Just pop somebody on the head with your weapon because you get that extra fire damage on top of its base damage.
And with this subclass, a lot of people are like, you guys are always looking at clerics to be frontliners. Like, no, they can be casters, but with this, for example, this subclass, it does have more of a defensive heavy armor.
Yeah.
You're probably going to be up there.
Right. You don't have to be, but you can be.
Right. You have the option to do that.
Right. Because let's see what happens. You put a wizard up there, or a sorcerer up there, or even a warlock who gets light armor. It's not going to go well for them in a hurry. So at least with the cleric, you do have the heavy armor with this subclass specifically.
Right.
Because most other clerics are only going to have medium armor. So definitely more defensive.
Then lastly, at level 17, Saint of Forge and Fire, you gain immunity to fire damage. You're just kind of increasing that resistance there to an immunity. And also while wearing heavy armor, you gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks.
Right.
So just a little bit more survivability on there. We're going to move on to the rating section of the video.
Right.
First up is the RP value. And looking at all of these abilities, again, the way we rate the RP value is we look at how the subclass abilities improve the base class abilities. So looking purely at the abilities and the spells gained, there's not a whole lot going on for the RP sense. Thematically, there's a lot of thematic abilities and things that go along with the class, but we're not counting that into the RP score.
Right.
So the RP score we're looking at, primarily the main abilities are the Channel Divinity, Artisan's Blessing. You're using an hour to create an item, and also some spells like Identify, Creation, could be used, Heat Metal, could be used in RP sense. And based on those things, we're going to give it a 2 out of 5 for the RP. But definitely very thematic with how the subclass functions, just not the most RP useful abilities, I would say.
On the combat side of things, much higher score, obviously based on, you look at the art alone, which we'll have up there, which is fantastic, especially in this book. We talked about it beforehand. The Xanather's Guide has a ton of just amazing art throughout it. But it's a little dwarf cleric and just decked out in some heavy armor and a big angry mace. It's a combat-based subclass for the most part. I mean, getting additional damage to your melee strikes, getting a chance at +2 AC, eventually fire immunity, but getting the resistance by level 6. That's pretty good to have early on, just a flat elemental resistance. And then eventually getting the resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. By the time you get 17, that's not great.
Right.
If that was flipped around and, like, say you got that at 6 and maybe got the additional +1 AC at 17, that might be better.
Probably.
It would be more effective at a lower level, but ultimately a lot of the abilities help with that. Of course, giving yourself heavy armor as well is always going to be helpful. Spell-wise, magical weapon, elemental weapon to help buff your abilities, or heck, or somebody else's even technically. Wall of Fire is a very good damage spell and also battlefield control. Right. We've seen some shenanigans done with battlefield.
It's used almost every combat, I feel like.
In Wall of Fire, if there's room for it, it does some work. But ultimately going to go with a 4 out of 5. There's not a lot, because a cleric is still a full caster by nature. It's what you're supposed to do, and there's not a lot of built into that to specifically help them do more with their spells or anything like that.
Right.
And Wall of Fire is really the only specific offensive spell they get added to it.
Right.
But with the resistance and immunity to fire damage, later resistance to other damage, plus the AC bonus that we talked about earlier, there's a very reasonable chance by level 6 that you would have a 22 or 23 AC.
Yeah, it's possible for sure.
Very possible by level 6, which for example,
you're not going to get hit too much.
I play a different subclass. A cleric also has heavy armor. Play Tempest, and mine's 21, and I've got a +1 AC from a shield and a +1 AC armor.
Right.
And mine's 21, and I'm level 11.
Right.
So it's a very, very defensive survivability cleric. So you're going to have a good job of not getting hit to help keep your concentration spells up and be much more effective combat-wise.
Definitely. And also the resistance immunity to fire is pretty big.
Yeah.
The only reason it's probably not higher is because level 17 is pretty far to go for the bludgeoning, piercing, slashing resistances. And again, some of the spells could be a little bit more offensive-minded, we feel like. Yeah. And maybe some little tweaks here and there. It's definitely more on the defensive side than offensive side.
He really wanted to get Fireball. He really wanted just to see Fireball right there. I mean, they do a lot of fire-based and 4G things. We're like,
maybe Burning Hands would make sense. But. Then lastly, we have the overall class synergy. The biggest thing is the Channel Divinity is one of the main parts of playing a cleric. But with this one, it is definitely more of an RP-based Channel Divinity versus some other ones are a lot more combat-based.
Right.
So there's a little bit of factoring in there. Other than that, I mean, there's like Divine Strike kind of has working with just thematically and getting in there and having synergy with your heavy armor. It kind of gives you more reason to get in there and whack on stuff. And not have to worry so much about it. It is weapon attacks. You don't have to get in melee range.
No, you have to. You can.
But with heavy armor, it makes sense to get up there and kind of tank a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you have heavy armor, a lot of other classes.
You don't feel terrified having to.
Right.
if there's no other heavy armor,
and you have
where
like,
in your
searing smite and stuff too. So you have some options there to kind of pump out some damage a little bit. That kind of synergize a little bit within there. Doesn't really help a whole lot. Doesn't really hurt a whole lot. So we just went with a flat 3 for the overall class synergy. It works really well thematically with how the abilities synergize together. Nothing that's going to blow you out of the water. Nothing that's going to really be detrimental to you either. Just a pretty solid overall base foundation for that synergy on that.
Yep.
And with that, guys, that's going to finish our subclass review of the Forge Domain Cleric. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications so when our new videos come out. Let us know in the comments down below what you'd like to see from us. If you have any experience playing with or as a cleric, Forge Domain, or otherwise, we'd love to hear that down in the comments down below. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.